Hello, everyone. Welcome to Tea with TPS after a short break of 2 weeks. This is a conversation with thought leaders in India and abroad. Today, our distinguished guest is Dr. Dhanuraj, Chairman of the Center for Policy Research in Kochi. In a short time, he has been able to build one of the best think tanks in India, certainly in Kerala. He does research not only on international relations but also domestic issues. The Center for Policy Research organizes a number of functions, offers courses in diplomacy, and very many other things. Recently, he organized a conference on India US relations together with the US consulate in Chennai. A large number of scholars and others attended it. It was a very useful, very dynamic discussion. Such a conference could not have taken place at a more appropriate time when India US relations are under discussion everywhere. So we have with us Dr. Dhanuraj, who will share with us his impressions about the conference and also answer our questions on how he saw the world as it emerges today. Welcome, Dhanuraj.
Thank you, sir. Pleasure to have you be here. And it's always a great opportunity and also a learning experience talking to you.
Well, let me start with the context of the conference. As it happened, it took place at a time when the discussions were raging about India US relations. Was it anticipated or was it a mere coincidence?
It was not anticipated. This particular conference was the culmination of series of webinars that we conducted as part of one small grant that we received from US Consulate General in Chennai. And when this program was in fact conceptualized when the new administration came in White House. This was late 2020. And of course, the project grant.
More than a year ago. More than a
year ago. And because of COVID and other reasons, we could not conduct some of these webinars on time. And obviously, that led to the delay in the in-person physical conference in Kochi. But the scenario was rapidly changing. Earlier, I found three scenarios emerging. When the project started, it was President Trump's to President Biden, the new administration coming to White House, and we want to discuss how the new administration is going to look into Indo-US relations. Then came China factor. China started asking some of the global companies to shut their operations in the country. And then, of course, there is a talk about trade diversification that many believe that India will be a beneficiary of that policy. Then came, of course, last now 2 months, the Ukraine-Russia war. So it was a rapidly changing scenario. Our focus, we need to change, revise, and review the topics for the discussion. So it was an interesting learning experience for the researchers in CPPR as well as also the stakeholders and also for the funder organization, US Consulate General in Chennai.
Well, thank you for inviting me to inaugurate the conference. It was a great honor. And the point I made, you may remember, that India-US relations have always been like a roller coaster ride. And I've been through the ups and downs of the relationship since 1980. So I could recount the many points at which we rose to a higher level and then plunged. And then again, slowly, I can recount so many. I'm sure all of you are aware of that. And so we have come to a point where the roller coaster has slightly started sliding down because of the latest developments in the world. This was not expected because when a democratic government took over, there were great expectations. Even though we really had no problems with Donald Trump, on the question of Ladakh, he was much more forthright than any other president. And the change was a little bit disappointing when the new president came. And that, of course, we thought that this is his time for preparation. He had not really made up his mind about China. And then suddenly he was caught into this Russia exercise. Maybe he had thought that he would go to Geneva and sort out Russia, etc., and then concentrate on China. He did not get a chance to do that, and he got caught in Russia itself. So it was very fascinating. So, what is your impression about the outcome of the conference as a whole? I was not there throughout, so I missed out a lot of it. But what would you tell us about the conference itself?
The conference, first of all, thank you so much for taking time to come and inaugurate the conference. And also, it was a very engaging conversation that you had with Mr. Michael Kugelman during the inaugural ceremony. And that actually, I believe that set the tone for the conference for the next 2 days. And we had 16 speakers attending the conference and deliberating on various thematic issues that are very vital to Indo-US relations. And but before I get into the conference proceedings, I think I also should reflect on the webinars that we had conducted. We had conducted a webinar on transferring technology from US to India on various levels, not only the defense technology, this is also about IT, it was also about artificial intelligence, technologies related to climate change, and the various challenges that we face in the relations. That was one of the webinars that we conducted. The second one was on climate change and the emerging global scenario. And in fact, it discussed about because during this time, Glasgow happened. So it was also very coincidental that that particular webinar happened during that time, and the speakers were more focusing on what are the outcomes that we could expect from Indo-US with the climate change finance proposal that was mooted when Biden came into the office in 2021. And there is a third webinar that was on security. Of course, Indo-Pacific is the focus of that webinar. And we discussed the change in the outlook of the new administration from the way it got changed from Trump's time to Biden's time. That was discussed in detail. And there was also a discussion on trade and commerce. What are the challenges that we face in trade and commerce? So these were conducted in the last 1 year. In fact, the first webinar was conducted in June 2021. And now in April, we are doing this, we organize this in-person conference in Kochi. So lots of things have changed in the last 12 months. And in this particular conference, we looked into 4 thematic areas again. We were looking into Indo-Pacific, of course, but our larger focus was on diaspora, people-to-people connect, and how the civil society organizations and think tanks and universities and academia could play a major role in improving Indo-US relations. So another session there was on trade and commerce, but we brought some business leaders, thought leaders from India, from different parts of the country, and they were discussing some of the challenges, especially with the new technologies that are developing, e-commerce, and also we discussed about data protection and policies that I think both countries have not come to a convergence to be. So the importance of understanding both the democracies and also institutional setup in both the countries that are also discussed in detail in that context of data transfer, data localization, data protection, and also the WTO part was also discussed because India, I think, has not taken a position or not ready to discuss data part in WTO negotiations. The third session was on climate change, of course. Again, climate change was discussed in the context of now the hydrogen mission is being mooted, and alternative energy sources are discussed in detail, and also the Solar Alliance and India's role in Solar Alliance, and also how US is contributing. But in the process, in the discussion, what I found out was discussion was about, I think it is in the context of Ukraine-Russia war, alternative sources are again discussed. It's not only the solar, but is also about natural gas. And Germany is discussing, one of the speakers were discussing about Germany and France discussing nuclear power plants. And some other countries are discussing coal. That was actually, that was the President Trump was supportive of coal mines, but that is also the reason they walked out from the convention later on. So now the global stage is again set for another debate on what are the alternate resources. So the context was set in that changing scenario. And the final one was on Indo-Pacific, how architecture is changing. So to the viewers, we could probably provide the links to the policy briefs that we developed out of the 4 webinars. In detail, recommendations and suggestions emerged out of the webinars that we could give it in the show notes of this show. And the details of the conference will be there on our website in the coming days. What are the aspects that we discussed in detail? But at the outset, I could say the world is changing. That is a consensus or the agreement that most of the speakers arrived at. And second, I think with Ukraine, Russia war, the role of India in this part of the world, especially Indo-Pacific and in the economic partnerships that we were not ready to join earlier. There was a discussion around that. Is the high time for us to review and reconsider some of the decisions that we had taken, and also in the context of recent agreements that India signed with Australia, India signed with UAE, and also the 2+2 dialogue was also happening a few days before the conference. That was also a right time for us to discuss. One of the learnings from the conference, in fact, for me at my personal level, was that we should come out of this conventional framework of discussing only the defense and security matters. There are so many other platforms we need to explore. For example, trade and commerce. Even in the trade and commerce, there are so many platforms that we don't discuss in detail. Even though there are some joint committees, there are certain groups that are asked to look into by both the countries, but I don't think that is discussed in public domain as such. So one of the arguments or one of the suggestions that come out of the conference was these discussions should not be confined to government level. It should be there outside of the government institutional mechanisms. And this should be shared by people, public at large. This information should be available in the public domain at large. What are the points and learnings? And there is also discussion about the US should understand and respect some of the sensitivities of the Indian, it's a vast country. It's a federal country, and there is by and large, there's an inequality in the country from region to region. So they can't come up with a uniform framework and mandate it to the all of country. That is something that come out of some of the discussions that we had.
But Dhanuraj,
there are so many learnings.
Even these webinars that you held were overtaken by events. That is true.
Yes.
There are some subjects which are very sexy, while others are not. We know about trade. We know that in trade we have not made much progress. Biden has not shown a great interest in trade. Even Trump had kind of given up towards the end of his tenure. But now it has all been overtaken by this big drama, which attracts everybody's attention. You don't read much about trade. Even climate change, Glasgow is over. The excitement is over. In any case, even if we follow all that was done in Glasgow, we'll be 3.5 degrees Celsius higher every year. So it all become less important than this whole issue of the new geopolitical situation. And so whatever we discuss on other issues will be decided on this basis. What kind of equation do we have with the United States? This has always been the problem. The US believes that if you are not with them, you are against them. is the fundamental position that they have taken right from John Foster Dulles onwards. And it has not changed because I have served in different during the Cold War period, after the Cold War period, during Clinton. So all these years I have noticed this, that a little difference of opinion with them, they'll immediately highlight it as a big difference because they expect something more than what we are able to give to the United States. And particularly after the formation of the Quad, this has become more intense. Because during the Cold War, we had a very good relationship with the Soviet Union, but it was not an issue in India-US relations. So now, after Ladakh and the Quad and the expectation about Indo-Pacific, whether it is an alliance or not, all these have given a new color to India-US relations. Don't you agree?
Yes, sir. I totally agree with your views. I give a background to this. Approaching this conference, we had so many meetings preparing the agenda of the conference. So one of the things that I learned, especially when the war started, Russia going to Ukraine. The understanding was interesting in India, or at least in this part of the world, since we are sitting in Kerala and talking about it. There is a lack of understanding or lack of intent, or probably I would say lack of appreciation also, that the public perception is different about this war. We had many round of discussions with various stakeholders or the leaders of the in the community for various reasons. I'm sure Kerala would be different from a northern part of the country, but in a state like Kerala, where people read a lot and they get exposed, especially in the recent times, I say they are also exposed to global media, unlike in the past. But even then, the perception was quite contradictory to the perception of the administration, probably, because they find it, I found it very interesting. Sometimes I converse with some of the diplomats that states like Kerala is totally, in support of Russia. In this contest, there could be historical reasons, political reasons. I'm not getting to the debate, but that understanding is very important while you draw the relationships. I mean, the how we are going to take it forward from here. I think the larger understanding in terms of the public perception, because I strongly believe domestic policies influence a lot. The domestic policy influence international policies, international relations a lot. So understanding of US about the domestic compulsions and also understanding of India's sovereignty and their priorities as such is something that probably could be a hindrance. But I now, after the conference, I see that, and also from the 2+2 dialogue and all, I see that largely they are accepting India's position now. Probably, sir, you may be able to give better insights, because I believe this was not the case in the past. But now India is an emerging power in this part of the world, and also US considers India as a major power. India has to play a major role in Indo-Pacific architecture. I think the way they were treating India in the past can't be repeated same way in the future, because they are very optimistic when I talk to them, some of them, and they want to they want to be very optimistic in their outlook. They don't want to discuss what happened in 1975 when India took the same position when Afghanistan was invaded by Russia. And so you also mentioned in your inaugural conversation, inaugural talk. So as I say, I repeat, probably I quote you here. It was a stranger relationship, and now we are engaging, and we are we are trying to embrace each other. So probably it will take time, and I'm sure 250 years of democratic institutions in US and 75 years of diplomatic relations with India probably will take some more years for us to understand each other better way. And India is also an economic power is emerging. So that could be one positive learning from the conference and also webinars that we conduct in the past.
Well, as far as reaction in India to the United Soviet Union is concerned, it's a legacy. It has nothing to do with what is happening now, because we have this notion that India-Russia friendship is eternal and there are no glitches in it, which is not true. We have never been fully support of Soviet policies around the world. What we had was a bilateral relationship based on certain coincidences, economic, planning, and we were more or less in the same kind of category of development, and therefore our consumer goods were welcome in Russia, in Soviet Union, etc. etc. So it was not an ideological linkage. Otherwise, we would have been in the Warsaw Pact. We are not. There was no ideological linkage, but there were several advantages both the countries had, and it developed like that. So even the United States saw it as a necessity for India to deal with the Soviet Union because our financial situation, our exports, all these things were more suited to Soviet Union than the United States. They only would buy handicrafts and handlooms from us, nothing else. While the Soviet Union will buy Panama cigarettes and Ludhiana sweaters. It's a different situation altogether. And therefore, there was a certain understanding about this legacy. And this applies also to the arms transfers. And so, in my long association with the India-US diplomacy, Soviet Union, Russia was never a factor. They never said, "Why are you doing with this with the Soviet Union?" That it was understood. But now it is different because they are seeing us as a kind of support for them in the Indo-Pacific. Pivot to Asia and all.
Mm-hmm.
And those are coming up more and more clearly after the Ladakh situation. So they feel that as part of the Quad, we should synchronize our relationship with each other. And the vote was not the real issue, in my opinion, because the vote we always abstain. Abstention is not support for anybody. But the feeling that they had was we were bursting the sanctions. That is what seems to have hurt them and feel offended about it, because that is the only weapon they are using. And in India, of all people, countering those sanctions by buying oil, it may be a small amount. Maybe Europe buys in half a day, as Jaishankar said, what we bought in 5 months. but it has a symbolic value. That here was a country who was considered a good friend of the United States, and we have a common perspective about China, etc. And then how come, they have become like that? And that, I think, is a deeper issue between India and the United States. And I have a feeling that after 2+2, there is some understanding on this, because the US side said that, India is not just going to buy all the oil from Russia. They are only doing it in a limited value. We are willing to sell oil to India. So that was the point I saw in 2+2. There was an advance. While this bickering is gone on one side, on the political side, they are determined to move forward. And that is what I saw in our conference. The Americans who participated in it, they were not grumbling, were they?
Right. Right.
They were arguing this case like that.
Yeah.
And so
yeah. So I think that there's a larger understanding that during the conference, and also all this, conversation around lunch and coffee during coffee breaks, gave me an impression that probably the new generation, that could also be a reason. Probably some of the speakers are not having that legacy issue as such. They are very young, and they're very open, and they also appreciate and respect India's role in the emerging world. And they're very open, and receptive. And that is also the reason I said most of them don't want to discuss what happened 20 years, 30 years back. They're interested in discussing what happened after 2000. So 22 years are more important and vital for India-US relations. Last 22 years, not the last remaining probably 40, 50 years. That's what the feeling that we got, and for various reasons. Indian diaspora, for example, in one of the in one of the sessions, we were focusing on diaspora. So diaspora is getting more recognition. Diaspora plays a major role. Diaspora and also leadership in most of the tech companies in US, and also the dominance of Indians in Silicon Valley companies. It could be a very constructive, positive engagement, improving India's relations. And somebody was pointing out that all the Trump and Modi embracing each other, embracing and then having this big show just before the elections. I mean, at least for the general public and for the diaspora, that is very important. So is the case with Prime Minister meets the CEOs of these companies when he visits US, and vice versa. They're also visiting India and meets the Prime Minister. I'm not so sure that was a case experience in the past, but this is something that was discussed in conference, that now more and more connect. It's not only with the government to government, it's also with the people to people. I mean, this could be at the different levels. It could be the 4.4 million, if I'm not wrong, 4.4 million diaspora community in US, and also at the different levels, the leadership positions that many of them are enjoying. And somebody was also pointing out that we have so many senators, I mean, congressmen of Indian origin. I mean, that number is increasing over a period of time. So that's a positive step. And I'm sure that is also could be one of the reasons why many speakers were very optimistic about India-US relationship in future.
No, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has made a big difference because his personality, the way he got along with Barack Obama, then even President Trump, and that has made a big impact. There is no question about it. Right. But don't think that the Indian community is totally united in the United States. The divisions that we find here are equally dominant in the Indian community there, because there is a certain division between the Congress loyalists and the BJP loyalists, even among the Indians. And their consideration is more their own ability to work there and flourish there than on the small differences that India and the United States may have. They tend to overlook it rather optimistically, rather simplistically, I would say, because they think these do not matter as long as we can work here and function here. But the importance of Indo-US relations and the importance of growing it is important for their own existence in the US is something they still haven't grasped, I feel. That's why I think Mr. Jaishankar said in reply to what the Secretary of State said about human rights here. He said, we are concerned about rights about the Indians in the United States. So, and that was a very, very clear signal he gave that he's always been saying to the Indian community that you have established yourself, you have done this. All this has happened because of the goodwill between the two countries. And your so primary will be to make sure, don't think that, you can ignore that and grow as a community. And that realization has come about very much these years. That's probably the reason why maybe you found that diaspora reaction were more helpful.
Yeah, but there's also, in addition to that, there's also discussion about the Mode 4 or WTO negotiation, where the natural movement of natural citizens, natural persons to United States. And I believe India has been debating for such a long time, and we have not come to a certain conclusion even now. And that eventually influences H-1B visa and other visa provisions. So this was also taken up during the conference, and the consensus was that these issues should be resolved, because these are all pending issues, and it actually affects the diaspora and movement of people. And especially India's service sector is dominating. The number I have is it was only 20% in 2000. Today, it is around 40% growth. And India becomes the seventh largest contributor in the US service sector economy. And obviously, the expertise and workforce is another important element everybody discussed during the webinars and also the conference. The disciplined workforce, and one of the speakers commented that US can give us the technology and we can offer them workforce, and that is a connect and identification. We can identify each other, how we complement each other.
Give us money, we'll
So
do the work. Give us the money, we'll do the work.
yes, yes,
The
yeah,
Quad, it was kind of accepted that the American money and Japanese efficiency and Indian productivity and so on. There was some kind of a formula found there when it came to
right.
COVID. So in that it worked. Initially, there was lots of glitches in US attitude to COVID itself. But later, when it resolved itself into a kind of a division of labor among the four countries, and which worked eventually, and now the United States feels that India's role in dealing with COVID was exceptionally helpful to them too. And that is something which really helped. But what do you think of the Quad? Will it ever be a military alliance? Isn't it only our own reluctance that it holds back?
One of my readings of the development in Indo-Pacific, especially in the recent months with the announcement of AUKUS, I have a feeling that maybe US and some other countries are not so convinced, or they are not, the lack of conviction probably would have led, or it's also plus additional strategic requirements or developments in this region that led to the formation or announcement of AUKUS. See, I'll go to look at the three core principles of code. So they said security, of course, then of course the health, global health, and technology, and then of course the trade and commerce they're talking about. So I think India, keeping the traditions in the past, I believe COD will remind us, even though we will have all these exercises, naval exercises, and we will be sailing to different parts of the world as a unit. I mean, India as a unit, and also with the other nations from time to time in the coming years. But I don't think it will develop as a military alliance. But it will be interesting to see if how the reaction response would be when something very, very troublesome occurs in South China Sea. How Quad is going to approach that issue, because so far all the discussions and debates are around emergence of an alliance, but I don't think they're tested out as a critical point, at a critical juncture of history. This will be tested out, and I believe more than Quad, probably at that point of time, India will have its own decisions, the strategic decisions in this part of the world, how to approach and how to react and respond to some of the emerging situations in South China Sea, because is it the only reason? I mean, Code 2.0 become into a operational framework. Is it because of the China's emerging role? Is something that we need to ponder over again and again. And now I see Code Plus is there. New Zealand is interested, and they are part of the Code Plus. So I don't think the Code 4 countries, they will remain there. But I don't expect more and more countries joining Quad and become an expansionary role. They get an expansionary role in this region. But probably we will, like ASEAN Plus and ASEAN, there are different frameworks. Likewise, we will also have some Quad Plus. And that Quad Plus need not be the military alignment, but probably could be something that will talk about other issues. There are so many issues, so many topics, themes that are listed in the code. So Indo-Pacific. So generally, we will reflect on the Indo-Pacific initiative and how code could be a supporting framework in the process. That's what I believe.
Quad has changed definitely after the AUKUS was formed. because there was no reason for them to have an AUKUS because the other countries, they're already, except for UK, they were already here, and therefore what they did was bringing an Atlantic power into the Pacific. That is what they did. And that is probably the reason because India was somewhat a shy bride. We were not entirely with them. That feeling they got. So, as a second line of defense, countries who are already in an alliance situation formed something as a result of our reluctance. This is what I believe. But what did it achieve? It achieved basically giving nuclear powered submarine to Australia. That is the only consequence of that. So Quad will still remain a kind of, when we say open Pacific, what we mean is without China's intervention. That is really what we mean when we say open Pacific. Others are welcome to come and go. But that has been somewhat changed by the Russia-China alliance, which took place during the games, during the Winter Olympics in Beijing, because that alliance has changed the whole situation, in my view. Because we were expecting that there would be a Cold War between US and China, and countries like Russia, India, France, Germany, etc., will be some kind of a NAM, a non-aligned movement kind of thing. And that was the scenario all of us had in mind, though we didn't know how it will emerge. And at least I felt that was a comfortable situation. But now you don't have a comfortable situation because China and Russia have got together. And Russia has begun condemning Quad. And it's not against them at all. But they still don't want to call it even Indo-Pacific. They want to call it still Asia-Pacific. And the Russians keep on mentioning, of course, after Ukraine, I don't know where they have said it. But before Ukraine, certainly they were very hesitant about even accepting Quad as a legitimate entity. So now that has changed. And that is one of the reasons why perhaps the Americans have become more touchy about India's position in political affairs. It may be true, it may not be. But did you get any new insights on this? The Russian
The insight was more or less, yes, definitely. God plays a major role in this part of the world. And but nobody talked about military alliance as such because more or less that conversation was around what are other aspects of could be discussed. I mean, for example, like I said earlier, the IPOI and what are the salient features of IPOI and how something like a framework like code could help them. So it could be on trafficking, or it could be because the moment we say open, secure, inclusive IPOI, rule-based regional framework, many were reflecting on IPOI in many of the conversations. All the
euphemism for anti-China. All these phrases, aren't they?
Definitely, but nobody was using the term the military alliance. I mean, of course, it would have been it would be there as a sublime topic, but
of India. Otherwise, they would have made it. Suppose India was not there, it was another country which is aligned to the United States, then there would have been no hesitation. But then, without India, what is the use of looking at the Indo-Pacific? So India was essential there. And therefore, we have some maneuverability there. Certainly, they are very attentive to our requirements and suggestions and so on. But they have turned it into a different organization. The Melbourne meeting, you may remember, when somebody asked Shankar about Ukraine, he said this is not a topic of our discussion. The security organization does not discuss issues like that because he just wanted to keep it out in order to have that unity expressed in appropriate terms. After that, of course, many things happen. But this is going to be a challenge, how to go with the Quad in a new situation of Russia-China alliances and also our problems with Afghanistan. See, in the case of Afghanistan, United States should be most grateful to us because we are the only one who have stuck with them all these years, all these months since they withdrew. And we have followed the pattern that the Americans established. We believe that the American presence was a factor of stability in Afghanistan, etc. So no other country in the world has said such things. So, but that has been forgotten. That's not the issue now. Now the whole issue has shifted to Europe, and as it happens, India, which is not a European country, is right in the middle of it because of our relations with Russia. This is what has created a quandary for the Americans.
So, since you referred Europe, there was also a discussion about the focus on Europe by the US. I mean, in terms of mostly on the trade commerce side, Biden is focusing more on Europe, and I'm sure there are sort of geopolitical, geoeconomic reasons for that. But what about India-US trade relations, commerce relations? How the pace with which we are trying to negotiate, or the understanding that should have been already, should have been already there, but that is not there. So this is a matter of contention, and it's a matter of concern also. Certain issues, for example, pharma, IP in pharmaceutical sector, they were discussing about even climate change. India's climate change expectations. I mean, the Prime Minister Modi declared 2070 for the carbon neutral year. So, but how much they're concerned and how easy and difficult for the countries to exchange technologies, how easy and difficult for us to mobilize the resources, even though we announced it, but both the leadership announced in 2021. But maybe the whole focus is on something else now these months, but it's high time for us to refocus on all these issues and try to resolve one by one, and that probably, and also there was a question about India's 2/3 of defense procurements happens, it is from Russia. What about US? Even though I think it's 21 or 22 billion US dollars, India US defense deal these days. Why are we not able to improve it? What are the constraints, and what are the why are we not able to negotiate and discuss and settle in? All the 2+2 dialogues talks about various agreements from 2016 onwards.
United States does not transfer technology. Even after we have signed all those 4 agreements, which Dr. Manmohan Singh refused to sign, that 4 fundamental defense agreements, and we have become a major defense partner. But their hesitations about technology is still very dominant. But in the case of Russia, though their equipment may not be as good as the American, we are able to manufacture it here. And that's a big difference in defense capability, because if you are so much dependent on a country and you are in a situation where you have to go against the countries against the interests of that country, then the whole thing can collapse. So Soviet Union and Russia later had no major interest against our interests in Asia. What China also, they were talking, Pakistan, they had nothing to do. So all these but America is involved in all this. And therefore, our committing ourselves entirely on American defense purchases is a very risky proposition.
Right. So adding to that, there was also, this is in relationship related to core discussion in this context. There are also suggestions that India should take the lead, or the United States of America and India should take lead of bringing these island nations, for example, Mauritius, Seychelles, all these countries together and help them in transferring or helping them to upgrade their technologies, not only for defense related, or not only for defense related matters, but in every sector that these countries can contribute. And there's also a trade and commerce interest as well. But moreover, I think there's a security architecture that you are building. And my understanding is that America, with the other 25 countries and some other 22 multilateral corporations, they are setting up a data fusion center. And there was a question about how open and inclusive this data open center for this region. Because if you look at the track record, these things are not happening the way probably we are expecting, the pace with which it are moving. So we should bring all these countries, and I know from 2+2 dialogue readout, we are also part of the UAE, Israel, Bahrain, the
That's
maritime. Yeah. So what about the other countries? Indo-Pacific is not about few countries here. Indo-Pacific is a vast area. Even Africa comes into the picture. So somebody asked this question: do you talk to African continent, their interest in Indo-Pacific? Why are we not discussing those things? Even in the conference that we organized, we didn't touch upon that, African interest, African continent.
that is Africa. That is the kind of interest that we have.
Right. So there is a discussion, or there is a demand from the speakers attended the conference. There's a consensus that I found that we should be, when we talk about inclusive Indo-Pacific, what inclusivity we are talking about. What is the architecture we are developing? Many aspects, because like within India, I talked about inequality and inequity. There's an inequity in the architecture framework in various other aspects of Indo-Pacific, and how India and the US could help other countries in the region. That's another concern that many of them share.
No, the greatest anomaly is that India is not a member of APEC even today. What kind of inclusivity, what kind of Southwest Asia Pacific are we talking about? I used to say to the Americans when I was there, as long as you deny us membership of the APEC, it is not, you're not even giving us the bronze medal. The gold medal is the permanent membership of Security Council. We are all arguing. I said, forget about it. Give us the bronze medal, because we are qualified in every way to be a member of the APEC. APEC should be nothing without India. Because nobody is talking about APEC now, because it's been set aside because of other complications. But so that is where the Americans show lack of sensitivity. And we tried for 10 years, we tried to get into the APEC, and then finally they said, no, it's all suspended. For what reason? And basically, that was because they're feeling that our trade practices were not fair. And that old mentality still persists with Americans. This is the problem with the contradictions in dealing with the US. When we cannot say that we can forget the past and move forward, that doesn't work out that way. Because these are deep feelings, deep understanding. On nuclear issue, for example, all this nuclear deal has not changed the American position towards India as far as nuclear matters are concerned. Even today, they don't trust you with nuclear equipment. A good excuse that we had the liability law, and so they couldn't supply. But they had told me that we are not going to supply you, because we don't want America. You go and buy all your nuclear metal from elsewhere, but we are not wanting to be instrumental in increasing your nuclear capability. So these are things which are very dormant in their minds. And all these will come into play as we move along. And so the situation in Ukraine and our position has given a certain amount of suspicion and the feel that they should bring us on line with the United States position. And that is not going to be easy, I think, whether this war ends soon or not.
Yeah. So, adding to this point, uh, uh, there was also discussion about the proposed Indo-Pacific economic framework by President Biden, and also FOIP, the free and open Asia, Indo-Pacific. And again, the discussion is revolving around how open and inclusive we are approaching this and the proposed framework, because
I think we are the matter. That is a fact. They don't think we are fair in our trade practice. And I've never dealt with trade with the United States. But my impression is that they still feel that we have to grow and become more independent, more, shall we say, receptive of their interests, etc. And that is very much there. That's why this trade agreement has not come about even now. And so that's another complication. But maybe looking forward, the best thing that can happen is this war, if this war ends and the equation between the US and Russia is somehow settled. And then perhaps we'll have a better chance of talking to the Americans. They will also focus on China more and will understand India's role. And therefore, President Biden has not had the time to really evaluate India's position in the changing geopolitics. It's my feeling, unfortunately.
But one of the speakers mentioned that now India receives bipartisan support from both the parties, I mean, Democrats and Republicans.
That's all
That,
also. And Republicans give us more than the Democrats do. Isn't it?
yeah.
If you look at
Yeah. I agree with you, but this is one of the interesting debate that we had because she had talked about we are getting bipartisan response. So others also said no, it's not like that. But there's a significant improvement. The way they look at India, and that's what I think the message was. Probably the way they were treating us in the past is different.
because we are stronger. See, I was in the United States before our nuclear test and after our nuclear test. India is different to them. When Narasimha Rao came in 94, not even a single line appeared in the New York Times. When Vajpayee arrived in 2000, it was front page story of New York Times. We don't need any other example to show how we have grown. They were criticizing us for the test, etc. But we grew in size and grew in importance for them. And that was a big turning point. That's why nuclear deal was possible. So,
Right.
And now the situation is changed more because of the geopolitical situation. So we need to work hard to come to an equation, and that is only possible if we set aside this so-called neutrality or partiality towards Russia, which we have been accused of. Indian domestic situation, I don't think is so important here. We were concerned only till our students came away from Ukraine. After that, there is no war in Indian newspapers. I mean, at least in Kerala newspapers. Those days, remember how much
Right.
everybody was shouting and screaming. But the moment the last Indian came out, it became a no war for us. And so that's not a major factor. But the major factor is the changing situation of a Russia-China understanding and the way others are going to respond to it. And this Russia-China understanding, many people try to, diminish its importance. Say that no, it is not like that. But I think there's more to it than that. And after the Chinese Congress, perhaps more will be known about this event. And that is when people have to seriously sit and talk about everyone and to some kind of a solution. Anyway, it was great to have that conference at this time. It looked like as though you had calculated it extremely well, organized at the most critical time. And so that was very good. And you were able to get a good number of people. And there were, at least I did not see any kind of confrontationist approach by the Americans on this. And that is seen in the 2+2 also. It's a forward-looking this thing. They are not minimizing the importance of India. And I'm sure this will.
I see these conferences like this will help a lot because this was the concluding statement of the conference. We need more and more conversations and conferences like this, which will involve not only the diplomats and diplomatic community. It will also involve think tanks, civil society, people to people, because that is very essential because there are different layers to India-US relationship these days. It's not about
thinking in the United States is not the government alone.
Right.
It's very important. The between the government and the parliament itself. We don't have that division. And the press and the judiciary, they're all independent, much more independent than we are. And therefore, we have to deal with them at different levels. You have to run after the government. Even if you are good with the government, it's not good enough. There will be a Dan Burton who will come and say, cut 10% of India's aid. And then we run around like crazy. So, and that pressure of an open democratic structure, we are doing it well now, but at the same time, it is to be increased. And that is where the role of NGOs and think tanks and conferences like this. So thank you very much. It has been a pleasure.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. And all the best. You are doing a very good job. Please carry on. And we are all very proud of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for your advice and guidance all the time. Thank you.